Hello everybody and welcome to my special 2000 subscriber milestone video. Yes, I'm finally recording another milestone video. It's been a while since the last one, my last and so far only subscriber milestone video I did when I reached 100 subscribers, so that's a while ago. And I have been wanting to do another one of these ever since, I reached, 500 subscribers maybe. But I never really could think of any good, topic or any good theme for a video like that. So I simply didn't know what to do. The only thing that I could think of was, some sort of AMA, Ask Me Anything video. But I honestly wasn't sure if people would actually want to ask me enough questions to make such a video. So this time I set up a Ask.fm account, and that turned out to be a good idea because, well, almost all of the questions for this video came in through Ask.fm because I suppose it's just the easiest way to do so. And as it turns out, I actually received a lot of questions. As a matter of fact, I received so many questions, I am not sure if I will be able to answer them all in this video, because I don't want the video to get too long. However, if that's going to be the case, I will just record another video. So I will answer all of the questions, but I may split it into, 2 or maybe even more videos. We'll see about that. As a matter of fact, I may take some breaks in between recording all of this anyway, because there's only so much I can talk in one sitting, I suppose. But yeah, I'm going to start with the questions in a moment. I haven't really decided what kind of footage to put on the video, so you won't have to stare at a black screen all the time. I think I may just, take some scenes from all of the games and all of the Let's Plays I played on this channel and, put them in some sort of montage. I guess that would make sense for a milestone video. But yeah, on to the questions. I've written them down in a Word document and I kind of ordered them a little bit. Basically, I put them into 3 different categories. The first category is about myself and, my person, my interest, and so on. The second category is about my channel and my Let's Plays in particular, and games and gaming in general. And finally, I have a category of random assorted, sometimes strange questions that didn't really fit the other 2 categories. So we're going through the categories one by one. Since most of the questions came in through Ask.fm, they don't have a name with them, but those people who chose to give me their name, I will mention them when I read the question. And yeah, I guess I'm just going to start. Like I said, the first category is about myself, and I'm going to start with the most basic questions that I got for this category. So here we go. First question: where are you from? Well, I'm from Germany. I'm sure a lot of people know that and maybe hear it from my accent. I currently live in a city called Cologne, or Köln in German, which is a fairly large city in the west of Germany. I am not originally from Cologne. I moved here after school to attend university, and then I stayed here because I got a job here. However, originally I'm from a different town and my family still lives there, and I, go back there every once in a while to visit them. And that town is called Bielefeld. And I'm pretty sure that every single one of my German subscribers is now going to smirk because Bielefeld has a very particular reputation in Germany. Basically, it has the reputation that it doesn't exist. Right. You heard that correctly. It is actually an interesting story behind that. It started, I think, as a satire on conspiracy theories. Someone made up a conspiracy theory about the town of Bielefeld, which has like 300,000 inhabitants, not existing, and evil forces at work trying to create the illusion that it exists. You can actually read it up, even on the English Wikipedia. There's an entry for the Bielefeld conspiracy, so it's quite interesting. And if you are from Bielefeld in Germany and you mention that you are from Bielefeld, you will almost certainly hear some sort of joke about that. Oh, Bielefeld, I thought that didn't exist. I can assure you everyone is going to say that in Germany. But yeah, that's where I'm from originally. It's actually a very nice town, you can believe me. And while I'm currently living in Cologne, I do plan at some point to go back to my hometown of Bielefeld, because I just love that place. So yeah, that I think answers my question number 1 here. So let's move on to the next question. And Marco asks a simple question, though considered impolite. Still gonna ask, how old are you? And as a matter of fact, 2 more people basically ask the same question, how old are you? And well, I guess I might be a bit older than you think. At least I think I'm a little bit older than my average viewer, because I am actually 36. Right, so not quite a youngling anymore, but I think I still have some years ahead of me, I hope. As a matter of fact, about I think 50% of my viewers are actually somewhere between I think 28 and 38. So I guess my average viewership is a little bit older than the YouTube average. I think 1/3 is about in the age range of 18 to 28, and the rest is above 38. I have virtually no viewers under 18, so I guess kids don't really like my channel. But yeah, I am 36, so I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so basically at a time when there was, well, no real internet available for, normal people, and no smartphones. I did have fairly early exposure to computers, however, due to my uncle, who had computers since I think way back since the 70s. So I was working with computers even when I was a little kid, but not so much with internet and all that stuff. And you can probably tell from some of the games that I used to play as a kid, Monkey Island and stuff, that I was a little bit older. So there you go. So let's move on to the next question. As vague or specific as you please, what do you do for a living? I always thought you sounded like a teacher or something similar. And again, 2 people ask the same question, what do you do for a living? So first of all, I am not a teacher. I am not sure if I would make a good teacher, to be honest, because in real life I'm, well, a bit socially awkward. I wouldn't say that I'm like super awkward or whatever, but in general I prefer to keep to myself, and I don't really talk that much in public. I guess I'm trying to compensate that by talking a lot in my Let's Plays or whatever. But I'm not sure if I would qualify as a teacher. So that's not what I'm doing. I actually work for a media monitoring company. As the title suggests, we monitor the media, usually for huge companies, but we have other clients as well, corporations, organizations, parties, all of that stuff. And basically they want to know what's going on in the news about them, for their public relations and whatnot. And obviously they can't read all the newspapers and watch all the news shows themselves, so we are doing it for them, and then we make like summaries and analysis and stuff like that for them. And I specifically work in the TV section of this company, so you could say that I get paid for watching TV. And that sounds a lot more glamorous than it actually is, because obviously I don't watch like movies or TV shows, but we watch news magazines, consumer magazines, all of that kind of stuff that might be interesting for our clients. And it can actually be quite demanding because our specific section of the company has like at least 100 clients, and I have to remember all of them, and the topics and products that are important for them, and I need to spot them when I skim through the videos, because we don't usually watch the TV in real time. And then I have to cut out the important parts and usually make some sort of summary, and it's actually a lot more difficult than it sounds. And we work in different shifts, including some sort of night shift, because most of the important news shows get aired in the evening, and the clients usually want their clips or summaries when they enter the office in the next morning. So we kind of have to watch it in the evening, and then work through all of the processes and make sure our clients get their stuff the next morning. So yeah, it's an interesting job, and I actually like doing it, but it sounds a lot more easygoing than it actually is. It can get pretty stressful, as a matter of fact. Okay, so I hope that answers that question. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. What's your first name? Only if you don't mind. I don't. It may not be a shock to you, but my real name is not Skadi. That's my internet nickname, I suppose. I picked that name because, first of all, I am interested in Norse mythology, but also because it is, well, kinda similar to my real name, or at least to the short abbreviation of my real name. My real name is actually Katharina. Yes, like Katharina Sforza, just with the German spelling, of course. And my friends and family usually just call me Kata or Kati. My sisters in particular like to call me Kadi with a D. So Kadi, Skadi is sort of close, I guess. So that's how my internet nickname came to be. But my full real name is Katharina. So there you go. Alright, let's move on to the next question, which is actually a whole batch of questions that I kind of grouped together because they touch upon similar topics. First of all, Kenny, that's right, Kenny, asks, we know your opinion on video games, but what are some of your favorite films and books? And then we have another question from Ask FM. Favorite song, favorite food, favorite movie, favorite color, favorite season. Basically, favorite anything that you'd like to share. And another question in the same vein. What type of music do you listen to? Which artists are your favorites? And one more similar question is, I just finished watching the brilliant TV show Russian Doll, which I would recommend to anyone. What TV shows would you recommend to your viewers, Skadi? So basically a whole bunch of questions about my favorite stuff. Let's see. Let's start with the favorite music, maybe. I would like to say that my taste is kind of diverse. I know that everyone likes to say that, but I do actually listen to a bunch of different genres. However, if I had to describe my musical taste with one word, I guess I would have to go with metalhead, because I do listen to a lot of metal. I am in particular fond of folk metal, so that's various kinds of metal mixed in with folky tunes or instruments. It can actually be like folk black metal or folk power metal or folk death metal, so it can be any sort of direction. And there are a few bands in each category that I enjoy. Um, However, since my taste in music usually goes through different phases, I had other phases in my life, and I usually take, some bands of each phase with me. So when I was a teenager, I listened to Britpop, for example. Then I had a phase when I listened to a lot of goth and goth metal and that kind of stuff. And then I had a very large phase where I listened to a lot of Japanese rock. Basically, when I started studying Japanese at university, I started to listen to Japanese music. So I have a huge bunch of Japanese bands in my CD rack, as it happens, and I still listen to them every now and then. And I guess then kind of came the folk metal period, so I listen to that too. However, I do enjoy other genres as well. Kind of related to folk metal is obviously folk, be it the more classic folk singer-songwriter stuff, or the usually sort of darker neo-folk. I like that as well. I'm even known to listen to a bit of country, believe it or not, because there are some kind of alternative country artists that kind of border on folk and singer-songwriter, so it overlaps a little bit. And so it happens that I do listen to metal and even some selected alternative country artists. I guess the one thing that I don't really listen to is basically this whole, pop stuff that plays on the radio for the most part. But if there's a song that I like, then I like the song, and I don't really pay attention to the genre. And since one of the questions specifically asked for my favorite artists, I'm just going to quickly name a few of them. I guess in the genre of folk metal, my favorite band would be Teresa's from Finland, although they're not quite as folky anymore. They used to have an accordion player, but she's not in the band anymore, which is a pity because the accordion is amazing. They still have a violin player though, but overall they kind of dropped a lot of their folkiness in the last few years. Another band that I really like is Tyr from the Faroese Islands. They don't actually use any folky instruments, but their melodies tend to be very folk inspired, which is pretty neat. And another one that I would mention is Arkona, a very amazing female fronted folk metal band from Russia. As for the non-metal folk stuff, I suppose my favorite band would be Tenhi, again from Finland. Not sure if any one of you has ever heard of them, but they are amazing. They release far too little stuff in far too many years, but they're great. I also really like Vadruna from Norway. Very great folky stuff. As for the other genres, well, in terms of Japanese rock, most of my favorite bands are rather obscure. Even most Japanese haven't heard of them. But there are a few somewhat more famous bands that I like, and I guess the biggest one would be Booktick. Again, a great band. Has been active for, 20 years or more, I don't know, but they're pretty cool. And the vocalist is super hot, just saying. Okay, what other bands could I mention? Like I said, as a teenager, I listened to stuff like Oasis and Suede. And Suede in particular is actually still one of my favorite bands. For nostalgic reasons, obviously, but because I still think that they made great music. So, yeah, there you go. A bunch of my favorite bands. Like I said, I could go on about this question forever, but I think it's time to move on to the next. So let's see. Favorite movie. I don't really watch that many movies, but I do enjoy mafia movies for some reason. So maybe I'm going to go with Goodfellas here. I mean, who doesn't like Goodfellas? Or, The Godfather is an obvious choice. I think The Godfather 2 would be my favorite here. If I had to pick a more recent movie, I don't know, what would I pick? Would you laugh at me if I said that I really liked the first Thor movie? But yeah, there you go. I really liked the first Thor movie. Shoot me. And another movie that just comes to my mind is Hot Fuzz by Simon Pegg. Super funny and very well made movie. I can fully recommend that. So next category would be favorite food. I'd say the pickard made by my grandma. Now, pickard is a specific Westphalian dish. Bielefeld, the city where I'm from, is in East Westphalia. Yes, that's actually how it's called, East Westphalia. It doesn't make sense, but that's the name of it. And I guess one of the local dishes is pickard, which is some sort of potato pancake, and it's usually eaten with syrup from sugar beets. And obviously my grandmother makes the best pickard in the world. So that would be my favorite food. Favorite color? I usually wear black, but that's not really a color, I suppose. So maybe I go for a nice dark blue, something like that. Favorite season? Definitely winter. I love snow. And I'm very sad that the place where I live, Cologne, doesn't really get much snow. So I always have to go to the nearby hills to get some snow in the winter and, do some winter hiking. I also like autumn a lot because the trees and the forests just look amazing in autumn, all the colors. So that would be my second favorite season. I don't like summer at all because I don't like the heat. So that's totally not my thing. Okay, what else do we got that I haven't answered yet? Books, favorite books. I have to admit that I haven't been reading a lot in recent years. And whenever I do read, it tends to be not like novels or whatever, but non-fiction, science stuff. For example, a recent book that I have read, I'm pretty sure there isn't an English translation of that book. It's called Die Kinder des Prometheus, The Children of Prometheus. It's basically about prehistoric cultures. I think the subtitle is A History of Humanity Before the Invention of Writing. And, I just like that kind of stuff, and I enjoyed that book in particular. If I had to pick like a fiction book, I have to go back a lot. I know that I really used to enjoy books by Pauline Getch about ancient Egypt. She wrote a bunch of, novels about ancient Egypt. I think one is called The Scrolls of Saqqara, I believe is the English title. I really enjoyed that book when I read it, but it's a few years ago that I read it because, like I said, in recent years I've mostly been reading non-fiction books, mostly about history and mythology and ethnology and all that kind of stuff. And what do I still need to answer? Right, favorite TV show. Well, since I don't watch a lot of movies, I don't really watch a lot of TV shows either. I guess a somewhat recent TV show I have been watching is Lucifer. Although I haven't actually watched past the second season so far. I know there's a third season, and then it got kind of cancelled, and then it got picked up again by Netflix, I believe. So there's going to be a fourth season as well. Um, I don't know. It's not like a super meaningful show, I suppose, but it's fun. I enjoy it. I also watch Supernatural, which is like going on for 14 seasons now. I mean, the question is, what shows would I recommend? I'm not sure if I would recommend that to anyone, simply because it's such a behemoth of a show. Um, but I enjoy it. It's harmless fun, and I just like watching it. And maybe one show that is, well, it's a few years old, but I remember liking it a lot. It's called Psych, and it's about a guy who pretends to be a psychic to solve crime. It's actually kind of funny, although I kind of lost interest in the last few seasons, but the first few seasons were actually pretty hilarious. So these are just a few shows that come to my mind at the moment, but I'm not that much of a TV show watcher, maybe because I watch TV at work, although it's obviously a different thing. I mean, I haven't even watched Game of Thrones and all that stuff. I haven't even watched Vikings, although I totally should, right? I mean, that would be right up my alley. So at some point I will be watching all of this stuff, I'm sure. Alright, I'm back. I just took a little break, but now I'm ready for the next question. So let's see, where did we stop last time? Okay, next question is from Marco again. Hobbies apart from video games. You mentioned chess and hiking. Do you play other games, cards, dice, whatever? Not really. I guess chess is the only board game that I play. I used to play in a chess club. I was decent for my age. I even won a few things. But I think if I had wanted to continue on a competitive level, at some point I would have needed to start memorizing openings and stuff like that, and actually sit down and learn my stuff, which I never really did. I mean, I knew like 2 or 3 standard openings, and the rest of the game I was just improvising, and it worked pretty well. But at a certain competitive level, you actually have to learn and memorize stuff, so I didn't do that. But I still like to play against the computer every now and then. But no other games, board games or whatever. So other hobbies. Well, I do like photography, I guess. Usually when I go hiking, I take my DSLR camera with me and I take photos, usually photos of nature. So I guess that would count as a hobby. I do like to draw. I don't really do it as often as I should. I'm also not like super amazing at it, but I'd say I'm decent. My channel banner, which is in urgent need of updating, is made by myself, for example. So I guess that would be another hobby. And, well, yeah, like I said, I like to read non-fiction. I'm interested in history, mythologies, languages, linguistics, and other subjects, if you want to classify that as a hobby. So, I guess that answers that question, I hope. Next question from Acacia. What are things that make you happy when you're feeling down? Would it surprise you that I don't really feel down a lot? I don't know, I guess I'm very emotionally balanced. I usually don't get overly emotional, neither like super excited and not like super down. So I'm always a little bit in the middle, I suppose. But I mean, sometimes I feel stressed out from work or whatever, and if that's the case, I like to hike. Just leaving the city, going into the woods and hike for a few hours. I don't do like super long hikes. It's usually, I don't know, 5 to 6 hours maybe. But it really is quite relaxing. And I do hike in almost every weather. Like, I've been hiking in the rain, I've been hiking in the snow, I've been hiking in super cold temperatures. The only thing that I don't do is I don't hike when it's hot, because like I said, I don't like the heat. So if it's getting too warm outside, I don't hike anymore. So most of my hiking is from autumn till spring and not so much in the summer. Alright, let's move on with the next question. Do you follow any sport and or support any sports club? And a question in the same vein by Marco. Do you like sports, the watching variety? Favorite team, if there is such a thing? FC might be likely, but maybe you don't care for football at all or sports in general. Now, this requires some explanation. FC refers to FC Köln, which is the local football team of Cologne. And, well, I have to say I don't religiously follow any sports or team. I do occasionally watch a match report, or, I keep an eye on the scores of my home team, which would be FC Köln, since I live in Cologne. However, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not originally from Cologne, but I originally come from a town called Bielefeld, and I still consider it to be my home because, it's where I'm from, it's where my family is. So I guess my real home team is the local football team of Bielefeld, and that would be Arminia Bielefeld. And I can tell you, being a fan of Arminia Bielefeld is hard and painful. It's one of those teams that, you are really only a fan of Arminia Bielefeld if you're from Bielefeld. It's not like the other huge teams like Bayern Munich or even Borussia Dortmund, which have fans from all over the place. But Arminia Bielefeld really only has fans from Bielefeld, I suppose. I mean, they're currently in the second league. So is Cologne, to be fair. But Cologne will most likely go back into the first league next year. Whereas Bielefeld, well, every now and then they manage to get into the first league, and they usually stay there for a year or two, and then it's back into the second league, and sometimes they go even lower. So yeah, it's a lot of misery and pain. So they're basically the walking dead of football, I guess. But yeah, I guess those would be my favorite teams. As for other sports, not really. Interestingly enough, when I was in my late teens, I was heavily into watching Formula One racing for whatever reason. I don't even remember why. I mean, it was a bit of a fad back then, I suppose, due to the successes of Michael Schumacher, but I wasn't even a Michael Schumacher fan. I was rooting for Mika Häkkinen, the Finnish racing driver. But yeah, for a few years I was following Formula One racing quite strongly. So I even had posters on my wall, I believe. Other girls of my age, they had like boy groups on their walls, and I had posters of Formula One racing cars on my walls. So there's that. But I haven't really been watching for years now, so I'm a little bit out of the loop. But okay, so much for the sports question. Let's move on to the next question. Another one from Marco. You live in Cologne and it's Carnival season. Well, it was when the question was asked. It's not anymore. So Carnival, yay or nay? I feel not a lot of people are indifferent to that spectacle. So if yay, anything you like specifically? The costumes, the dancing, general mood? Well, first of all, Carnival season in Cologne lasts from November to February or March, whenever the actual Carnival core season is. So it's quite serious business here. Carnival in Cologne is different from Venetian Carnival or Brazilian Carnival, and there are basically like two major aspects of it. Actually like three, but I'm not really familiar with the third. The first one is like the street carnival, which means there's a parade with floats and costume people throwing candies and flowers and stuff like that. Then you have the partying, which is going on all over town during these days, and it usually involves a lot of alcohol and usually very crappy music. And then there's the third aspect, which is like specific carnival sessions, which usually involve like stand-up comedy, sort of, and that's usually for the really hardcore carnival fans. They go to these events where you have like usually very crude humor and again a lot of weird crappy music. So I've never been to any of that, and I'm not really one for the partying and the alcohol and the crappy music either. However, I have on occasion watched the parades, so the street carnival. I don't do it every year, but every now and then I go and attend the parades, and I do like to dress up myself, so I like to put on a costume. I'm trying to remember my last costume. It's been a few years ago, but I think I dressed up as a Valkyrie in a self-made costume. I had like a white robe and a plastic helmet with feathers on it and a plastic sword. But it looked pretty cool, so I remember dressing up as a Valkyrie last time I went to one of these parades. So I do enjoy that. I mean, it's once a year and I don't do it every year, but I'm not one for the huge partying. So I hope that answers that question. And we have another one from Marco. You like history and mythologies. What got you started in that? Are you yourself religious or spiritual? Well, as for the first part of the question, what got you interested in that? I don't remember. I don't remember because I have been interested in it since I was 6, 7, basically since primary school. Back then I was mostly interested in ancient Egypt. I remember that I had this one book. It wasn't even my own book. It was from the school's library. I was at a very small school in a kind of rural suburb of Bielefeld. So we had a very small library and we had like one book about ancient Egypt, and I would just keep borrowing that book over and over again. So I would, borrow it for a few weeks and then I had to return it, and a few days later I would borrow it again. So basically I was just hogging that one book about ancient Egypt for a month. And yeah, that's how it got started, I guess, and I kind of branched out from there into other fields of history and mythology, and I never stopped. So it's been going on for quite some time. As for the second part of the question, are you yourself religious or spiritual? Not in particular. I mean, I wasn't raised that way. My family are, well, mainline non-practicing Lutheran Christians, I suppose. We went to church once a year on Christmas, and at some point we actually stopped doing that because it was just too stressful, so we dropped it. My parents didn't baptize me, which is, well, fairly common still, to baptize the children after birth, but they didn't do it for me, so I never really grew into it. And I also don't literally believe in all these mythologies or whatever, but I would say I feel connected to it. So I don't literally believe in some god sitting on a cloud or whatever, but I do appreciate the meaning behind it, or the symbolism, or whatever you want to call it. Sometimes I semi-jokingly say that my mind is an atheist, but my heart is pagan, so I don't literally believe in it, but I kind of feel connected to the meaning behind it, I suppose, if that makes any sense to you. So I'm not sure if that counts as being spiritual. I don't really categorize it like that. Make of it what you will. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Is there any part of the world where you haven't been but want to travel to? Yes, there are a lot of places in the world where I haven't been to but want to travel to. I have been in various countries of Europe. I have been to France several times. I have been to Italy. I have been to Sweden, I think 3 times. I have been to the Netherlands. I have been to Spain. And I have been to Japan, which is not in Europe, but it's basically the only non-European country I've been to. And I have been to the UK, but only in London. And I guess I have been to Norway, but only a short trip to Oslo. So I think that's most of the places I've been to, not counting countries where I just, drove through, like Denmark or Austria. When I went to Italy, we obviously had to cross the Alps and stuff like that. But yeah, I would like to visit a lot of other places. I think top of the list would be Iceland, because that looks just amazing. And if I can't go to Iceland, I guess Norway would do as well. Like I said, I have been to Norway, but only on a short trip to Oslo. So I would like to visit the fjords, maybe. Other places I would like to visit. Well, like I said, since I have been interested in ancient Egypt since I was a kid, I guess at some point I would like to go to Egypt and, actually see the pyramids. And, several places in Asia come to mind as well. India would be interesting, or maybe something like Cambodia. I don't know. I haven't really thought about all the places I want to visit, but it's a lot. I should travel a lot more than I do, because at some point I will be too old, so maybe I should finally go and do it. But it's always kind of hard to get it started. But yeah, there are a lot of places I would like to go to. As a matter of fact, I would like to go to the United States too, at some point. Mostly for some of the natural sites, go hiking a bit. So I'm pretty sure that would be cool as well. Okay, let's move on to the next question. This is a batch of questions again, which are all related. What languages do you speak? And the next question, how long have you been learning English, and what other languages would you like to learn? And there's another one that is language related, but I'm going to leave that for later. So, what languages do you speak? I speak English, more or less. I speak German, obviously, because it's my native language. I had 2 years of Spanish and French at school, but to say that I speak the languages would be a vast overstatement, because I have forgotten most of it. I might be able to understand a little bit if I see a text, but I don't actually speak it. I do speak Japanese because I studied it at university. I have to admit that I'm starting to get a bit rusty, because I haven't been using it as much anymore ever since I left university. So I should make sure that I don't forget all of that anymore. How long have you been learning English? Basically since 5th grade, because that's when you usually start learning English at school in Germany. At least when I was a kid. I think they may actually start even earlier these days. But in my days, you started English in 5th grade. Do you want to learn any other languages? Yes. There are some languages that I'm interested in learning. I probably never will, because I don't really have the time. And if I have time, I probably should spend it on, keeping my Japanese and not forgetting it anymore. But if I had the time to learn another language, I don't know, I guess since I want to go to Iceland or, Norway, some Scandinavian language would make sense. Personally, I always like the sound of Russian, so I would be interested in learning that as well. And I mean, to be honest, that's enough for a lifetime, right? Like I said, I don't think I'm going to be learning another language. I speak 3 languages well enough to communicate in these languages, and I have some rudimentary knowledge of other languages, so I think that's enough. But it would be nice if I could learn more languages. Okay, we have another language-related question from Ipe. Since you are well versed in Fursak runic script, I am compelled to ask if you know any old languages like Old North, Old English, Old French or Gothic. I would like to know about your knowledge on the big 3 classical languages, Latin, Ancient Greek and Sanskrit. I like your videos because you seem to be more civilized traditionally than most others here on YouTube. I will follow you till enda. Well, thank you first of all. And now to answer your question. Yes, I do know old languages, and that's Latin. I had Latin at school for 5 or 6 years, so quite some time actually. It was a second language that I took after English, so I took it in 7th grade and then almost till the end, I believe, so it's been quite some time. Obviously I don't really speak Latin because you don't speak Latin, you just read the text and translate them. I'm not sure how good my Latin still is. You know, if I were to read a Latin text now, I'm not sure if I could translate it just like that, because you don't really use Latin anymore once you left school. But I had Latin at school for quite some time. As for the other languages, the one that I know the most of would be Old English. English was my minor at university, and I actually took a course on Old English, and we read a few Old English texts, which is actually quite interesting. I remember one specific incident. I was staying with my grandmother, and I was preparing some stuff for that English course, and I was reading some Old English to her, and my grandmother, who does not speak English, was actually able to understand a little bit of Old English, which makes sense because my grandmother, when she was a kid, she still spoke a dialect, a Low German dialect, which is the dialect that is spoken in the northern part of Germany. And it's called a dialect, but it's actually more like a different language. My great-grandmother, so my grandmother's mother, she only spoke Low German dialect, and I did not understand her. I could not communicate with my own great-grandmother because she wasn't speaking high standard German, but only Low German dialect. So that was pretty interesting. But yeah, Low German, the actual dialect, is quite different from Standard German. It's a lot closer to Dutch, obviously. And, you know, the Old English language is based on, you know, Northern German dialects from all the Saxons and Angles who went over to England. So there is a connection there. And my grandmother was actually able to understand a little bit of Old English, which I thought was rather interesting. I don't have any deep knowledge of any of the other languages you mentioned. I have more like structural knowledge, so I know how they are related to each other and the differences to a certain extent, because my other minor at university was linguistics, so we learn a lot about languages in general and not so much like the specific vocabulary or whatever. So I can't read Old North, I can't read Ancient Greek, I can't read Sanskrit, but I can tell you a lot about these languages, and I would if I had more time in this video, because when it comes to languages I can just talk for hours and hours and hours. So you better not ask me about languages in a Ask Me Anything video, because I will talk about nothing else. Anyway, let's make a cut here for this question. But yeah, I do speak a few ancient languages, or at least I know a little bit about them. All right, let's move on to the next question. What's the most unusual animal that you have eaten? Well, I can think of two, but unusual is kind of in the eye of the beholder here, because I think they are not quite as unusual in the cultures they originated in. I'm pretty sure about the one anyway. I'm not so sure about the other. But they are unusual for me and probably many of you. So the first one was, I think it was an antelope. Or was it a zebra? No, I think it was antelope. It was basically some sort of antelope beef jerky from Namibia, because my sister spent a few weeks in Namibia. And when she returned, she brought home this snack, which is apparently very common in Namibia. And, it's dried meat, like beef jerky, but it's made from antelope. And I tried some of it. And I don't know, it didn't really taste any special, but I guess for a Middle European person like me, antelope would be an unusual animal to eat. And the other sort of unusual animal were snails. And yes, that was in France. I was in France when I was, 12, 13, and that was before I started learning French at school. And I went to a restaurant with my family, and I ordered a menu, and I didn't really know what it was because I didn't speak French. I just ordered the menu because the dessert was mousse au chocolat, and I could understand that. So I ordered the menu, and as it turned out, the first course of the menu were snails. So it was literally a plate full of snails in their shells, and a little plate of, some sort of dip or sauce with it, and that's it. Just a plate full of snails. But I actually ate half of it, and I don't know, it was weird. It didn't really taste great. It wasn't horrible either, but it was snails. By the way, the punchline is the main course of the menu were entrails, so that was quite an interesting day for me when I had snails and then entrails and then finally the mousse au chocolat that I craved so much. But yeah, antelope and snails would be the most unusual animals, I suppose. And a question that is kind of related: what's the weirdest food that you actually like? Well, like I said, weird or unusual is kind of in the eye of the beholder. There is a food that I like a lot, and apparently it's weird to specifically people from the United States, maybe from other countries too. It's not weird at all here in Germany, and I'm sure you can eat it in other countries as well. But I was very surprised to find out that people from other countries, specifically the US, are kind of freaked out about it. And that food is met. Met is basically minced raw pork. So it's really just, raw pork minced, and you put it like a spread on usually a bread roll with onions and a bit of salt and pepper, and then you eat it. And it's delicious. It's absolutely delicious. I love Mettbrötchen, which is, the bread roll with the met on top. But apparently eating raw pork is a bit of a no-no in the US, so a lot of people from the US are kind of grossed out about it. But it's fairly safe. Obviously you shouldn't keep your Mettbrötchen lying around for too long. And when you go to a butcher's shop and buy it, there's a regulation that they have to sell it on the day it's produced. So it's actually fairly safe. I've never gotten sick from eating meat, so it's really not as dangerous as some people make it out to be. But yeah, I would count that as weirdest food, even though, like I said, it's not really weird here in Germany. Most people uh, have probably eaten it or at least know about it. Okay, I guess that should be enough for this video because this video is getting pretty long. I basically managed to answer all the questions from the first category, you know, the questions about myself. I still have a lot of questions about my channel and about games and gaming, and a few assorted questions that didn't fit the other categories. So there is going to be at least one more video where I will answer all the other questions. But I think this one is long enough for now, so I hope you enjoyed my answers, and stay tuned for the next video where I will answer the remaining questions, hopefully. So yeah, bye bye.